So one of the things that we always say to everybody is think about your maturity model for this, in the sense that, you know, how or what skills do the different groups of people have at this time? So if we're going to start using Teams and users have been using it for meetings and video conference calls, how are we with that? Are we good with it? Is everybody okay with that? Or have we still got some sort of skills gaps in that area? Do our champions know that well enough? Does our IT support know that's well enough? If we're then going to start moving to, say, building Microsoft Teams, integrating with Planner and Power BI and Power Apps in the Power Platform within Teams, do my power users and my service desk know enough about the Power Platform, for example, to be able to support that when we start integrating it? And if the answer to that is no, then you've kind of ticked a little box in your maturity model matrix to say, right, we need to make sure that these groups of people are prepared for this. Now, a lot of users don't necessarily need training when it comes to lighting up a new tab, because at the end of the day, the tab is going to be built for them by a certain group of users. It's just there for them to get that information. So depending on what it is you're doing determines which groups of people need to be skilled up as part of that adoption release. And think of that as that kind of phased approach when you release that new Teams piece. And if you think of it that way, then you'll always follow that same process every time you're about to launch one of the new features into Teams. Quite often we get asked, this could be very expensive then. So if we've got to keep on top of this forever, and we're going to be having all these sort of migrations and releases and utilizing new cloud technology, all these kind of pieces, it's going to get expensive. Well, it doesn't have to get expensive. So I don't know why, but that just suddenly evolved. But I'll go back to it if it needs to. But the bottom line is, classroom training is always more expensive because you've got one person going on a specific course. So it's very tailored, very specific for those groups of people. They might be going on a public training course, and there might be only 2 people, IT people, centric, whatever. So, you know, the cost for an average 4 or 5 day class, for example, is somewhere around £1,700, £2,000 a person, depending on what course it is. But it's a very small percentage of your users that would be trained on that. What we tend to find nowadays is a lot more companies prefer to go down the on-site or the private training route. Now that's really great because it means that we can tailor it for that company. So if I was, for example, training a service desk of 6 people or 8 people, then that's going to be way cheaper to do a private course than have 8 people go on a public course. And the costing of that roughly works out around £200 a person based on 10 people. So suddenly the cost, the day cost reduces dramatically by tailoring that content at that group of users. So suddenly the budget that was originally being used for, you know, just sending people on public training courses suddenly gets reduced massively, and that allows that money to be spread across longer term to support the new technology when it gets rolled out. Now, the other thing, of course, you got to think about is the users. So this is where we start thinking, as I said before, if you're going to start onboarding user groups into, let's say, telephony, you know, so we've got the telephony, it's being rolled out. We've got this new calling capability. So we want to let everybody know how to use the new telephony tools. We want to build some training material, get some ramp up skills, etc. So suddenly, you're not training sort of 10, 20, 30 power users. You're training the mass users who are going to be using that shift in tech. And so that's really nice, because what you can do for those groups is run several sessions a day. Put as many, I mean, I've done groups of 100 for this in the past per session, and suddenly you're hitting 40 to 50% of the user force in a very small time frame in these sessions. So we do 3 sessions a day with 3 groups of people, 25 people a day on average, which works out at £30 per user for that education and training ramp up, which actually is a very low cost in terms of an education space. And the reason the price is obviously a lot lower is because A, you're reaching more people, and B, you're very targeted in the content delivery. So instead of trying to teach users, 50 new things, you're focusing on only the sort of 10 key things that they need to learn with that new feature set you're rolling out. So we're aligning bespoke delivery with bespoke product release. And then the final bit would be digital content. So the ability to build what we would call pathways using digital training content that would follow up from the onboarding. So you'd have the out the box content, which was, how to use Teams, how to do this, how to do that. And then you might have some customized based on the delivery sessions of the onboarding, where it's literally built for the company as a post workshop training video. So the users can always go back to it at any time and just do a quick 20 minutes, 30 minutes recap, and they're off and running again. Hopefully, therefore, taking some of the strain off the service desk in the long term. So we find that it's this combination, but more and more it tends to be the bottom two that in the long term provide the sustainable adoption, and then the on-site private delivery, keeping like the champions up to speed, etc., and sort of they might do one of those every 6 months with the skills ramp up based on the new tech that's coming out. Or if you're doing a particular migration, focusing on that area of skills. So for example, we did talk about the custom delivery, and the Cloud Direct guys are working with this company as well, and they're a company called IOPP. And we did 2 different sets of adoption training for those guys around, firstly, Microsoft Teams, and then secondly, along with the Cloud Direct guys, when they started migrating their file shares. And so over the space of sort of 2 years, they've done 2 different projects rather than trying to do it all in one go and causing a lot of confusion or sort of stress amongst the users. It's, too much. I don't need to know. I can't remember all of this. So it was very phased and done in a very designed and managed way. And that allowed the business to go, this is what we're going to deliver this year or this time frame. These guys, Cloud Direct, they come in, they're going to work with us technically, help design the migration plan, and then following on from that, CK guys are going to come in, build a training program and train our users on how to use it. And because we're working with Cloud Direct, we're able to talk to them and say, well, what are you guys doing specifically to fix that problem? We can then tailor on the back of what they're doing to make sure our training aligns to that. And that way you get the best of both. And so in this kind of session, you'll see here, very much branded to them. It gives them a bit of intro about what it is they've got. We talk about the different ways that they're going to work. And as we go through this particular session, this was a specific user session. And it's really important that I repeat something Dimitri said earlier. Teams is not just about Teams. It's about integrating with the tool set that you use all the time. So whether it's OneDrive, whether it's Yammer, whether it's SharePoint, all of these different collaboration tools being driven through the Teams client, but also as a user, when do I use what? Where should I be when I'm doing this? So what we did here was we integrated a few learning elements of working with data, working with files, which was part of Teams, but at the same time, using that as a step up to then start talking about Teams. So each of these is designed to be applicable to the users in the session, right? So this has to be session based for the users. So you'll notice that once we've got past the let's collaborate, it's now let's collaborate in Teams. So you've learned the principle of the way we used to work or the tools that we know you've got. Let's now focus on doing that within Teams. And the key here is to really focus on the points that an average user is going to do every day, not fill it full of stuff that they're not going to use on a regular basis. There will be people that will need to know those extra things. That might be service desk and champions. But when it comes to building the learning plan for the company itself, we only showed content that the user in the session would expect to see. So focused sessions, very key. And I think we ended up training about, I can't remember, a few hundred users in a very short time frame, purely by focusing on this piece. And we knew what they could and could not do. So we obviously didn't talk about the things that were not an average user permission. So the users would get this sort of training, and the power users would get a much more advanced training session bespoke to them as well. And then the IT would have their own as well. So that's a good example of what a customized delivery would look for. And it would probably be about an hour and a half, heavily focused on demo and encouraging them to go away and try that afterwards. We would record the session so that they could go and watch it again as well, as many times as they wanted. So basically what we did was we aligned the learning, the skills pathway with what was going on in terms of their IT and their delivery mechanism. So we would be making sure that we were aligning to the engagement plan, the comms plan, the vision of the technology, and then we were effectively dealing with the bottom two pieces of, you know, getting the champions and the training piece set up.